All right, for your bell work, I want you to take a couple minutes and go back through your notes and list the 5 ways that I can prove triangles congruent. And also on the right side, make sure that you understand there's 2 ways that you cannot prove triangles congruent. So make sure you're writing those down as well. All right, this is an extension of yesterday's lesson. This is 4.3b. So yesterday we learned all about the side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, and hypotenuse leg ways that we can prove triangles congruent. So let's take a look at these 2 images. I can see that I have a couple of angles and a side that are matching up with each other. The important thing is that they are matching up with each other in the same order. So I'm going to start with this guy, my single marking. Then I'm going to move to this angle right here, which means I would have to move to the identically marked angle here. And then consecutively, I've got another angle. So that means I'm going this way to the other angle. So I'm going to say that these 2 triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. I've got 2 consecutive angles. Here's my first angle, here's my second angle, and there's my side. So angle, side, angle. I'm sorry, angle, angle, side. But you notice here I also have to label my triangles as congruent. So your labeling is just as important as finding out why the triangles are congruent. So let's talk about that for just a minute. I have to match up everything. So clearly angle A and angle D go together. So since my statement starts with angle D, I'm going to have to start my second part of the statement with a D. And then I can see that angle B and angle E are congruent, so I'm going to use a square for those instead of a circle. So since my second letter is a B, my second letter in my tail end of the statement has to be the matching E. And then of course C and F are going to go together, so I'm going to use a triangle for those. So that F is going to go at the end. So the labeling is just as important as determining how that they are congruent. Okay, identify the given if the triangles are congruent, so very similar. I'm noticing that they threw me a reflexive property here. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't find what they're talking about over my diagram. So if you recall from the last unit, reflexive property means that two figures are sharing a side or an angle, or they're sharing some part of the image. So I can see that these 2 triangles are sharing this side length. So I'm going to put an X there for reflexive property and say that QS is congruent to SQ. All right, now let's see if I can figure out what's going on here. So I've got triangle QRS. So triangle QRS is congruent to the other triangle. Okay, so let's first figure out if they're congruent, and then we'll go from there. So I can see in this triangle right here, let me get my highlighter going on here for just a second so we can see what's actually happening here. So in this triangle right here, I've got a side and an angle and a side. I've got, an angle and a side and an angle. Now I'm looking at my second triangle though, and I'm seeing something a little different. I've got an angle, and then I've got another angle, and then comes my side. So my first triangle was angle, side, angle. My second triangle, the sequence goes angle, angle, side. So I cannot say that those are congruent. So these are not congruent because the order is different. They have to have the exact same order. All right, again I see reflexive property over here, so I'm going to go over to my diagram and realize that this is the part that is being shared. So I'm going to say that PR is congruent to itself, or RP. Okay, so PQR, triangle PQR, that's this guy, triangle PQR. All right, so I'm starting with the right angle, then I travel across the hypotenuse, and then I go back to the right angle. So PQR would have to be congruent to starting with the right angle. That would be RP, RSP. All right, now how are these two triangles congruent? Well, I can see, I'm hoping, as soon as I see this right angle like this, I'm hoping that I can use hypotenuse leg. That's the first thing that pops into my mind. It's not always going to happen that way, but usually it will. Okay, so I can see if I'm going to use hypotenuse leg, I have to look for congruent hypotenuse sides or legs. So I can see that my hypotenuses are congruent, and then I have this additional leg here. That compiled with the 90-degree angle means that my triangles are congruent by hypotenuse leg. All right, reflexive property, I'm seeing it again. So right here is my reflexive item. I'm going to say that ZD is congruent to DZ. And then clearly I can see that I have three corresponding sides, so I could say that this side is congruent to this side is congruent to this side, and then of course I have my reflexive property. So now I have my three items that I need. So I'm going to say ZWD is congruent to triangle, let's do it backwards, DSZ by side, side, side. I have three corresponding sides that have three corresponding congruent parts. All right, now I've got reflexive property again. So here we go, reflexive. And I'm going to say that triangle, so that's IJ is congruent to itself. And triangle KIJ would be congruent to triangle HIJ. And that would be by angle, side, angle, angle, side, angle. So that would be this one. Okay, identify if the triangles are congruent again. So that's what the whole lesson's about. Going to keep doing the same thing over and over. This time I'm seeing some vertical angles. So that's another piece of information you're going to have to know to look for. So here we go. I've just got vertical angles here. And I'm going to now say that the triangle LMO is going to be congruent to triangle LMP. And that is going to be by angle, angle, side. So let's point that out here in a little bit of a different color. I've got an angle, and I've got an angle and a side. And then I have a matching angle and an angle and a side. So they're congruent by angle, angle, side. All right, so they've given me side links this time, not necessarily congruent statements, but I can translate the information into congruent statements because the numbers are clearly the same. So that side would be congruent to that side. RI would be congruent to AC because they both measure 3, and then it looks like I've got this congruent angle here that is an included angle. So I'm going to say that triangle RTS is going to be congruent to ACB. Let's get our markings correct. And the reason that those two triangles are congruent is because of side, angle, side. I've got two sides and an included angle that correspond to two sides and an included angle in the other triangle. All right, so right away I'm thinking hypotenuse leg because I see the right angle. So let's see if that's true. I'm going to say that I see one congruent side and the 90-degree angles, of course, are congruent. I need that third side. Well, Don't forget your reflexive property. You can call that as part of your proof because that side is included by both of those triangles. So I'm going to say triangle LMJ. So LMJ is going to be congruent to triangle JKL. So let's get that in order. JKL. And it looks like I do have congruent hypotenuses because they are across from the right angle. And then I have the third piece, which is the extra leg that I need. So I'm going to say those are congruent by hypotenuse leg. All right, vertical angles. It's another vertical angle. You guys should be getting pretty good at this by now. So I'm seeing my vertical angles, and I'm now going to call my triangles congruent MLP. MLP would be congruent. Let me get this order right. So MLP would be congruent to KLJ. And the reason those triangles are congruent, I'm going to say I have an angle and a side and an angle. And then in my corresponding triangle, I have an angle and a side and an angle. So angle, side, angle. All right, some more vertical angles. Let's just go ahead and go through this really quickly. I see a vertical angle here. So just by looking at the image, I can see that they are congruent by side, angle, side. I have a side and an angle and a side, and then I have a matching side and an angle and a side. So let's go ahead and do that. So triangle ABC is going to be congruent to triangle EDC. Just to get the triangle naming correct. All right, this is a proof. We're not going to really go over this, but take a look at it and see if you can go through it and come up with some ideas on how you might solve that, because that's a little preview of what we will be doing tomorrow. So hope you feel better, and we'll see you soon.